share. Oh. Okay, here we go. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation on the ABCs of back to school with CF for all of our community. Please remember to keep your lines muted and enter any questions you may have using the Q&A feature. We'll do our best to try and answer everybody's questions in the time we have. Now it is my pleasure today to introduce today's panelists. We have Chloe Ford from Lurie Children's Hospital. We have Janine Cheatham from the University of Chicago Comer Children's Hospital, Maureen Brennan from Advocate Oak Lawn, and Christine Presta from Advocate Lutheran General. Today they are going to be discussing or sharing information on the need and how to set up a 504 plan, the challenges we may be facing with the return to in-person learning, and the need for proper respiratory care in a school environment as we get back to school. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Chloe to get us started.
All right, hello everyone. So first, just to start off, and David, you can advance slide. Just want to give an overview of the difference between an IEP and a 504 plan, so people who don't know are aware. Basically, an IEP is an individualized education plan, and it is guided by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA, which is an education law. And it provides special education and related services to a student who is identified as having a disability that negatively impacts their ability to receive academic instruction. And a student who receives special education services is entitled to modifications for curriculum, classroom accommodations, also specialized instruction related services such as occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, and social work or counseling. A student with an IEP is reevaluated every 3 years, and that is just to determine continued eligibility for an IEP. And a parent can request a reevaluation really at any time within that 3 years, as long as it is not within less than a year from when they were last reevaluated. And you also will review an IEP annually. So you will always have an IEP meeting. A 504 plan, accommodation plan, is guided by Section 504, which is from the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. That is a civil rights law. It is to ensure that a student who has a disability has access to accommodations to improve academic functioning. So in order to qualify for a 504, a student must have a diagnosis for a physical or emotional disability or impairment that restricts one or more major life activities. For example, paying attention in class or class participation is affected, things of that sort. A 504 plan can also provide extended time, small group administration for statewide testing for a student. But within a 504, a student is not able to receive occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physical therapy. The law does not require a 504 plan to be reevaluated, like specifically every 3 years. It just says a periodic reevaluation. However, generally schools will do it every 3 years for a reevaluation. And also 504 not needing to review annually either. However, would suggest still asking the school to have an annual review just so that you are keeping the 504 up to date and making sure just with the growth of the child that everything that they need is in there still, and that you can take things out as well if you need to. Next slide. So just a couple of examples of accommodations. Now, I like to tell parents that I can give you several examples, but really you're going to go on what is best for the child and what is needed for the child. when it comes down to it. So some examples are, say a child is receiving meals at school, they might be receiving extra meals or helpings at no charge so that they're able to maintain their nutrition, having snacks that they bring to school and they're able to then have those at any point in time throughout the day. And with those snacks, generally are brought by the parent or coming from home. And usually those snacks are making sure to follow any guidelines regarding school allergies or anything like that. So making sure we're following the school guidelines, and also not too tempting or attractive to the other students in the classroom. Now, sometimes a way that families will get around that as far as the student eating within the classroom is to have the snacks either just in their locker or stored in the nurse's office. And then sometimes they're able to then go to like the nurse's office, for example, to then have a snack if they need one throughout the day. Having hand sanitizer or tissues at the desk, having unlimited access to water or a water bottle at the desk, as well as during hot weather exercise and PE, having Gatorade or other electrolyte drinks. Also being exempt from absent or tardy policies due to illness, doctor visits, clinic visit, hospitalizations. So making sure that they are not being punished or penalized for having to miss or being absent or late. And then making sure that there's a concrete plan for when a child is not at school because they're either sick at home or they have been hospitalized. And that would be sitting down with the school and specifically the teachers to discuss what that plan is going to look like. So that might be extra time to make up homework, tutoring, homebound services, modifying work assignments, whatever the school is really able to kind of work out with you, just to make sure that the student is able to stay on track and not fall behind because of the fact that they were sick. And then just keeping really open communication. And that's open communication regarding illnesses that might be happening at the school so that a family can really make an informed decision about if maybe a child needs to stay home that day. And also how the child is behaving within school. So has their energy changed, their attitude, behavior, signs that could be that they are becoming ill. So making sure that communication stays together. So those are just a couple examples of accommodations that can happen, but there are many more. And like I said, it's really based off of what you think is best and needed for your child in the school setting and what the school can accommodate. So with making a request, you first should know like your school policies and what they generally do for someone who has a health condition or disability. And you don't have to wait for the school to initiate a 504 and IEP. You can call the school and ask for that 504 and IEP yourself. And when you do so, it's also best to do it or try to do it prior to the start of the school year. So it would be like now during the summer. The reason being is that once you have that meeting, then it's able to be implemented and enacted for the entire school year rather than having to wait throughout the school year to then have a meeting to then initiate it. And then also making sure that a student who qualifies, they should hold a team meeting. Once they qualify, there will be a team meeting, and that team meeting can have various school personnel, but generally it will be you, the teacher, the case manager, whoever runs the meeting. Sometimes the principal will attend as well. And then if it is IEP related and they would be receiving like physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech, social work, there would have been some evaluation for them, and they would also attend the meeting to give a report as far as their decision. And then you can ask your care team for a letter to go with to be able to provide to the school. That letter can indicate explaining CF, why it affects the child, how it affects the child in a school setting, and then also list out some accommodations. So I know the letter that I have for my families, if they need it, has a very long list of various accommodations that they could use, but it is more to encourage the conversation and really get the mind going so that the parents as well as the school can really sit down, look at what is on that list, and then decide, are these some of the things that we need? Are there other things, just to make sure that they are really tailoring it to that child? And then for some families, they don't want to have a written IEP or a 504 plan. They just want to have a verbal agreement with the school. And for some, I know that has worked, being able to just have a verbal agreement with the school. However, it is just good to know that without a written plan, the school does not have to honor that agreement. So at any point in time, they can decide we are no longer providing that accommodation if they want to. So it's just good to know that. So yes, you can totally just have a verbal agreement, let the school know what you need, but it does not mean that they have to follow it in the end if they do not want to, or maybe just don't have the capacity to it anymore. So what if you're denied? If you were denied, one thing that you can do first is kind of go to your CF's team, and maybe they can do some additional advocating for you. That could be talking with the school, writing another letter, things of that sort, so that they can kind of help out and just for the school to understand how important it is for the student to be able to have those accommodations. If that does not work, you can also file a complaint with your state education agency, and you would be asking for a mediation. If the mediation does not work, you can also ask to have your case heard by a hearing officer or administrative law judge. And if that does not work, you can also go to a lawsuit. And the lawsuit can sometimes be a little bit more challenging, potentially a little bit more expensive. It really just depends. But those would kind of be the steps in regards to if you were denied. Now, this is not just being denied for an IEP or 504 plan. This is also could be for if you already have an IEP or 504 plan in place. However, the school is not following the accommodations that they have agreed to follow and that they have agreed to give. Now, for transitions. Now, first I want to talk about transition when it comes to IEPs, because when you have an IEP, you also have a transition IEP. Usually gets established at around 14 years of age. And the transition IEP helps to begin a family thinking, or the student to think about career goals, independent living, post and secondary education. And schools may not always integrate the child's health condition within planning that process. So it's really nice when you go to the IEP meeting to be that voice to talk about if there are any barriers, any restrictions, and also if the balance between the goals that they are kind of establishing for that transition really fit in line with attention to their CF care as well. So just making sure that there's a really nice balance there. And then also, it really just helps preparing the child going into adulthood when you have that for a student that needs an IEP. And it is good to also have the kind of the plan for transition from your CF care team and see if those things align. So if we're looking at what is aligning from what we've established from the school and also the conversations that we've had with our care team, does it all come together to really help the child prepare for adulthood? Now, aside from an IEP, transition is something that every family should be thinking about for every kid, because we want to make sure that as they continue to get older, they transition very well from pediatrics until they're into their adult care. And so we want to make sure that we are getting them to the point where they're able to talk about their meds and their treatments. They know their care, they can talk it for themselves. They're independent in their care. So as they continue to get older, those are the things that we want to see. And we especially want to start seeing that once we hit that high school age, that they're really able to be independent in care and speak to the care as long as they are capable of being able to care for themselves and have the understanding of their CF and everything like that. So making sure that we are doing that, and so everyone knows transition is very focused on each child. So no one is going to be the same in regards to their transition and how those phases go. But that is definitely a conversation that you want to be having with the school as well as with your CF team as the child continues to get older. And then When it comes to schools, you just want to make sure, as far as like continuing the transition, once we get to college and things like that, we're making sure that we are having our accommodations in place. Now, one thing to know, you don't have to have an IEP or a 504 plan within like the high school setting just to be able to have accommodations in college. So say you've done well, feeling accommodated and supported at school without having an initial a formal 504 plan or IEP, totally fine. Once you get to college, you'll then be talking with the School of Disability and Services, and you will be talking with them regarding what accommodations you can have at your school. And so then that will be set up. And for those who have a child that will have an IEP does not follow them into college. So basically, once they get to college, they're going to have what is more like a 504 plan. So it still can have those accommodations, but it will not be listed. It will not be referenced as an IEP anymore. It will just be their school accommodations that are being offered at the school. So going into college, one thing that is really good is making sure that you check off talking with the School for Disabilities in regards to what they're able to do, letting them know about you, that the child has CF, all of those things, so that they are then able to start really being a part of the transition to college. So making sure to do that. Now, when we talk about private schools, that's when things get a little tricky, because if a school is not federally funded, it's not required for them to follow IDEA or for them to follow a Section 504. So they do not have to have, fulfill the accommodation services that you might be requesting if they're not receiving federal funding. Now, with that though, the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, sometimes that can kind of be a little loophole into being able to have accommodations within a private school, because the ADA protects a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, and who has a recorded impairment, or who has regarded to having an impairment. So if many of patients or many students with CF qualify under an ADA for services. The only thing is, and we'll go back to it, if a school is not federally funded, so if that school is not federally funded, it is not required. They don't have to do anything. They can establish something with you and set something in line, but it does not mean that they have to continue with it. But what you would be requesting would be accommodations that are similar to what would be an IEP or a 504. So just making a request for the school to be able to give those accommodations, and they may or may not agree to do that. I've heard many schools who have been amazing and have been completely on board to provide a student with whatever they needed, and there have been no problems, but that is not always the case. And so we have to just be cognizant of that. The other thing to know is that if a school does not receive federal funding, they also do not have to accept a student with any health conditions, because they may not have the services to provide for those health conditions. So it's just another good thing to know when you're going into the private school route, knowing kind of the school, their policies, and then what accommodations that they generally will provide to someone that has health concerns, so that it gives you a good idea as to what you might be disclosing. And you may not say anything regarding the health needs because you don't want there to be any problems, or you may feel that, or you may know that this school is very accommodating, and so therefore you're totally fine with being able to share this information because you know the school will be willing to provide accommodations that are needed. So it's really what is best for you, family, child, in knowing the school that the child is going to. So that is always something good to know. If you need any additional assistance, you can always go to your CF care team to ask questions regarding a 504 and IEP, and also for Compass within the CF Foundation. For a referral, you can go to them as well, and they would be able to assist with 504 and IEP. They're open Monday through Friday, 9 to 7. Their number is there, as well as their email. So definitely have resources to go to as far as being able to implement one. And if any questions, ask now.
Thank you, Chloe. And I think we'll turn it over to Maureen.
Hi, thanks, Chloe. So I was asked to talk a little bit about, returning to school, especially this year with everything going on with COVID. And all you have to do is turn on the TV every day to know how much anxiety and uncertainty there is every day within like what's going to happen this school year, and especially what's going to happen to our patients with cystic fibrosis this school year and whatnot. So it's a super hot topic. We don't have all the answers right now, but just a few tips to share in anticipation of getting ready to go back to school in August or September. So obviously the first thing is communication. Your CF care teams are here for you. We're here to answer questions as best we can with the resources we have. And reaching out to your school, whether you're talking to the teachers or the principal, the school nurse, the administration, first to, especially if it's a new school for you this year, so you can introduce your child. It gives you the opportunity to kind of educate that school staff about what is CF if they've never had a child or a student in their school with CF. And as Chloe said, when you're doing that 504 meeting, it just gives you that opportunity to kind of let you know what your child's going to need this year. So I think open communication is really going to be key for the education and just to decide what's going to be best for your child this school year. And if you need your CF team to communicate with school in any way, if there's any questions or concerns, I know our teams are more than happy to take that time to reach out and talk to your school administration as well if you do need that. So obviously there's considerations at each school level. I know, starting with preschool, that's probably, your child's first, if they hadn't gone to daycare, it's kind of their first going out into the world kind of thing. So it's a really good to talk to that preschool or daycare and with your teams to decide like, what do I need? Like what accommodations will I need for that? Especially just in preschool, I feel like we worry a lot more about the germs and whatnot because everyone's sharing. So whether that's making sure they just have their own box with their own crayons and markers and pencils and scissors and tape and glue and all that kind of stuff so that they can have their own separate thing, to just, knowing where the bathrooms are and things like that. Again, just communicating with your team and your school team is going to be key at each level. And as Chloe said, especially if you do have a 504 plan, you might not have to redo a meeting every year, but just for each year you want to say, hey, just a heads up that my child does have a 504 plan, just so that the new teacher is aware of that, even though your school office probably already knows about it. And then also talking, I know a lot of kids changed in 5th or 6th grade, and then obviously they'll go to high school. So again, just being proactive and making sure that those things are in place so that you're not reversing in the wrong direction and, getting behind the 8 ball, as they say, like especially if your child misses a lot of school or whatnot. I think being open and honest up front is best, just so to give your child the best success they can for their school year. And I think there's so many resources available out there right now. The CF care team, our CF website, the CFF Foundation has some great resources regarding talking to teachers, regarding accommodations, sample 504 letters, things like that, just to kind of help you make that decision. And no decision is a wrong decision. I know that we have several families who are super nervous. I know most schools are going back to in-person learning. Some are still going to offer some homebound remote options. Some of our families have decided to go the actual traditional homeschool route because they're just nervous about what's going to happen, especially, and I think, we're all getting heightened anxiety again about this year as well. No decision's a wrong decision. We know some, parents work, all the other kids are in school. That, like I said, there's no wrong decision. You just have to make the best decision for your family. And we're all here to help you navigate those decisions if you need help, and the schools will help you as well. There are some great resources on the CF YouTube channel right now. There's one about navigating uncertainty through all of this COVID, as well as emotional wellness and COVID. I encourage you to look at those resources. I encourage you to look at, even looking every day, what's the CDC gonna recommend for my child? And the doctors are here to help. The doctors and teams are here to help you navigate that and make those decisions a little bit easier for your family. So reach out, be open, communicate. We're all here to collaborate with you. So those were just the key takeaways I just wanted to chat with about today. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Maureen. And now we'll turn it over to Christine.
Hello, thank you, David, for inviting me out today to speak about respiratory care and going back to school. My name is Christine Presta. I'm a respiratory therapist from Advocate Lutheran General Children's Hospital in Park Ridge. And I just wanted to quickly go over a couple of things about going back to school with treatments. So today we're going to cover respiratory treatments and scheduling, finding time to fit in all of our treatment plan, the Zephyr home spirometer that was sent out from the foundation, sports and activities, and exacerbations. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we're going to cover treatments and scheduling. It's super important for your morning routine that we don't skip. I always like to count backwards from the time I have to be somewhere. So like, let's say you have to be at school at 8:30 and it takes you about half an hour to get there. So that's 8. And then maybe getting dressed, having breakfast, half an hour. So that's 7:30. And then our 45-minute long process for our treatment plan. So subtract the 45 minutes. So now we're up at about, let's see, maybe 6:30, 6:15-ish. And our morning routine is definitely going to include our bronchodilator if it applies, taking our mucolytics, and which would be your pulmozyme or inhaled hypertonic saline. And these items can be done, these medications can be done the same time as your airway clearance using your high frequency chest wall oscillatory device, or also known as your garment device. So kind of like doing 2 therapies in one. And this will help with some time management. And we want to make sure that we're still doing our huff coughing, which we can do during our airway clearance and after. And always, always, always finding time, most important, to clean our nebulizers according to the CF guidelines after each and every use. Super important. I cannot stress this enough, as the nebulizers can harbor germs and bacteria. It is most important to follow the CF guidelines and clean them after each and every use. There is a lovely, lovely 10-minute video. Feel free to watch. It's on the CF Foundation page for respiratory care. I refer to this video all the time in the clinic and have patients watch it as frequently as they can. Sometimes you forget things as time goes on. You may be becoming a little lax in cleaning, but of all things, it is so important for infection control to clean nebulizers according to the CF guidelines. Use the nebulizers that the CF Foundation has done actual studies with as far as medication deposition into the lungs. So we always want to use what's been studied by the CF Foundation. There's reasons for that. So we want to make sure we're getting that good treatment in. While we're in school, we want to make sure that we participate in physical activity. So this means your gym class or PE class, whatever it may be called nowadays. Make sure that your child is participating in this. Healthy lungs are super important. Active lungs are very, very important. We don't want to become sedentary. Join a sport that involves running, any type of cardiovascular exercise. It could be track, it could be soccer, football. baseball, anything that involves any type of activity, and really limiting screen time. I always tell families in our clinic that maybe save the screen time for airway clearance time. So that's a great time to, watch Strawberry Shortcake. I know I'm dating myself. Strawberry Shortcake, or, anything while you're doing airway clearance. That could be our screen time then. So it's important to talk to the school about the 504 plan, as Chloe and Maureen mentioned earlier, in case your child should need any treatments during the day. It's super important to talk to them in advance before the school year starts. What happens if your child is having an exacerbation, they're sick, they might need an extra med during school? These are all questions to go over before they go back to school. Next slide, please. So after school, we're going to repeat our morning routine, our airway clearance, inhaled medications, and we're also going to fit in our Zephyr home spirometer sent out from the CF Foundation. So if your child happens to have one of these, I know that some clinics have gone back to doing spirometry and pulmonary function testing in the clinic, but it's also a great tool to have on hand to track and trend your FEV1s, especially for technique and skill. So it's important that patients learn, remember, and keep doing those techniques. Big deep breath in, blow it all out, 6 long seconds. That technique is so important to have over the course of your life. This is done every quarter. So it also is a great tool to help with tracking any changes in lung function, any exacerbations. This is just another tool that your care team can have to help with management of exacerbations and tracking and trending lung function over time, over the course of one's life. Next slide, please. Sports and activities. So again, encouraging physical activity, exercise and sports, keep your lungs active and healthy. Do deep breathing. Yoga is great for anybody who needs to deep breathe. Don't opt out of PE class, please, unless you absolutely have to. I know it's sometimes, people call into the clinic asking for letters to exempt, but it's really important. If they don't need to be out of PE class, please keep your child or yourself in PE gym class just for that movement. Next slide, please. Exacerbations. If you feel your child or yourself are having the exacerbation, please call your CF team immediately. Don't go to bed at night thinking, oh, should I have called? Should I have done? No, if there's a question, if you feel uncomfortable about something, even if it's just to review a care plan or you have questions about anything, please reach out to your team. We're here all the time. They may tell you to increase your respiratory treatment. So instead of twice a day, going to 3, maybe 4 times a day. They're definitely, I know I would always say, please perform your home spirometer, use the Zephyr. It doesn't cost anything for you. It's so important to make sure that you're using that, especially when we want to see if there's been any significant change in lung function. Maintaining our equipment, super important. Clean your nebulizer handsets according to the guidelines after every use. Make sure you change your nebulizer compressor filter. Some nebulizer machines have filters on the side. They must be changed every 6 months. Please keep an eye on that. Maybe set yourself a little reminder in your calendar to change it every 6 months. Nebulizer handsets also need to be changed every 6 months or less. If you notice that they're getting a little, yucky looking, call your CF team. They may be able to supply you with a few. I know side streams and Pari LC pluses are sometimes a tad bit expensive, but call your team because they may be able to help you with this. And make sure some high frequency chest wall oscillatory devices, the garment devices, not all, but some on the market, do require a filter change. So make sure you contact the manufacturer or the rep or your clinic, respiratory therapist should be able to advise on this, but there's a filter in some of those devices. They need to be changed. This is what keeps our compressor clean, strong, still giving that same, pulsations and everything. Keeping that very clean is very important. So make sure you change the filter if it applies to your particular device. Next slide, please. Okay, focusing on healthy lungs. I cannot stress enough how important it is to please continue your treatment plan as prescribed by your provider and your care team, your family, your son or daughter, or whomever. You talk to the care team, you come up with your care plan, follow it, please. I realize that many patients are having the best FEV1s that they've ever seen in their lifetime. And that's great. And I'm so proud of each and every one of you. But I still please, and your care team still please, would like you to continue with your airway clearance, your nebulizer therapy, despite how great your FEV1 is. We want to maintain it. We want to keep it there. And also, again, participating in sports, any other physical activities, continuing to use that Zephyr home spirometer to track and trend your pulmonary function. Use it monthly if you can. It doesn't cost anything. It just maybe takes about 5 to 10 minutes of your time. It may not even take that long to use it. And then check with your school, again, with that 504 plan for your treatment and sick plan. And then I wanted to just thank you all again for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. I know it was short and sweet and to the point. And, this is my Chihuahua Chico. I like to close with this picture. About 15 years ago, I started at Advocate Lutheran General working in the NICU. And I couldn't quite figure out the headset to use for the neonates when putting them on non-invasive ventilation. So I took one home with me and practiced on the dog. So here's the picture. But thank you so much again. Any questions? I'll take them at the end.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you.
Now, thank you guys for sharing all that important information. I know we did have a few questions that are coming in through the chat feature, but I know one of the common questions, and Janine, maybe you can help address this, was enzymes in school and treatments in school where need be. Can you share any information around the need for treatments in school?
It's pretty much an individualized plan. There are some situations where kids' pulmonary status is more advanced and they would benefit from additional treatments in school or midday. And so many have been able to arrange to go to the nurse's office to do an a cappella inhaler, that kind of thing, prior to lunch. And sometimes that's been helpful for kids who have a good deal of mucus and secretion production, and maybe they have a little bit more advanced lung problem. I've also had situations, and the other members, please chime in too, where kids are being treated for an exacerbation and they would also benefit from an additional treatment. They're on antibiotics well enough to go to school. Sometimes the school staff is very accommodating. Will have the child go to the nurse's office prior to lunch. It's usually better to do before a meal, and they can do it in a private situation where they don't necessarily have to do it in classroom. I also have some kids who have asthma as well as CF, so they have a need for inhalers at school. If you're actually keeping any like airway clearance devices, like your acapella or your inhaler spacer, it's just good to pay attention to how often that's cleaned and where it's stored. And it's kept in a safe place. And I think Christine, you would agree with that. Keeping those things clean is really important. As far as enzymes, most schools require children to have the enzymes kept in the nurse's office and that they go and get them prior to meal. there are some situations, I've had a little bit more experience with private schools where they've allowed the kids to self-carry and self-administer prior to snacks and meals. But most schools, I would say, have to go to the nurse's office because although it's not necessarily a harmful capsule or medication, it is administered per policy in the school office. Having access to them at the time of the meal is what's important. And so it's not like half an hour before, you really want them to go get them when they're going to eat. Or some kids will do it after they eat, but most of it's prior to. I don't know if there's something specific regarding enzymes that families had. Please feel free.
I know that Illinois passed a law that children can self-administer their enzymes as long as the parents agree to it. I think they might just have to sign something saying that they know that their kids are able to administer it on their own. So that was passed, I think, last year or 2 years ago.
Quick
so
shout out
any
to all of
families have
our
pushback.
advocacy.
Yes,
Quick shout out to all of our
exactly.
advocacy members because
I
they
know
got
that was great. So,
Which it definitely makes sense. And then there's many kids that have after school programs or sports, and they self-administer anyway in that situation. So yeah. But I still get a lot. I still get a lot of pushback about having them.
right. So we
as
just
a person. So that's good to know.
Awesome. And obviously there were a lot of questions about masks, and I just saw another one coming through where, some of the schools are going back, but they're not necessarily requiring masks for all the students. Should a child with CF or a person with CF continue to wear a mask around big crowds?
My personal opinion on this is because of the extreme ambiguity and back and forth on the COVID numbers, et cetera, that you're going to be in a safer situation if you actually wear a mask and have hand sanitizer and have your own water bottle, all that kind of thing when you're in school, because you're around potentially large groups of folks and you just don't know. And I think our CF kids are used to wearing masks in clinic and such. So I don't know, please feel free to also chime in, the other group members. But I don't know if you feel the same or not.
Yes, masking.
Yes.
Yes.
I talked to Dr. Akhtar yesterday. We were chatting about this issue because I know it's going to be coming up more and more. And he, is definitely in favor of our kids still wearing masks as well, and then just seeing what the CDC comes out with. I think, since this vaccine's not available for 12 and under, it seems like a lot of our schools, I feel like they are still going to be in masks, but we'll see. I don't know, but yeah, definitely masks.
Definitely. The other thing that I'm sure that you've talked to your CF teams about is the quality of the mask and making sure that the mask is cleaned. If you're using a paper one, obviously it's disposable and you use a new one, but if it's a cloth mask, making sure that those are cleaned and on a regular basis. And the ideal mask wearing obviously is over the nose and the face and the mouth. But I have had a couple of the kids with asthma. If the masks are cleaned in the laundry, if they're with laundry with a lot of scents in it, it can be actually very irritating. So making sure that whenever the cloth masks are clean, that you use a very simple soap and let them drip dry, or not necessarily in the laundry with any of the scent fabric softeners and boosters and stuff like that. Because if you're inhaling that can be irritating, make it cough.
Great. And we did have a few questions regarding siblings of people with CF. And is there a need for them to have a 504 plan or anything with the school, or are they eligible to do anything like that?
I would say as far as eligibility, it really just comes off of if they qualify based off the definition for an IEP or 504 plan. So if they do have a disability or things like that, then that is what then would qualify them for an IEP or 504. Just being a sibling of someone with CF, that would not qualify them for an IEP or 504. But still, when we kind of talk about like those verbal agreements, this could be kind of one of those situations where you're just talking to a school about the fact that they are a sibling of a child with CF and what that means. And so if they can just kind of, allow for the child to do certain things to be able to be cautious so that they are not bringing illness back home, things like that. So just being able to have really an open conversation with the school about what they can kind of provide in that sense.
Awesome. Another question just came in regarding specifically N95 masks. Is it okay for a child to wear that all day at school?
I have no problem with letting them wear an N95. We wear them all day here in hospital. So it just has to be comfortable, obviously, and then you have to look at how often you're changing it out. If it's something that they are wearing for a couple of days, it may, your breath has moisture in it, it has bacteria in it, and just, looking at changing it out would be, at regular intervals would be important.
Great. Well, and it looks like our panelists have been monitoring the chat and answering a lot of the questions as they've been coming in. So thank you guys for continuing to address everybody's questions. Pretty much, there were a few questions that were submitted online regarding specific personal health situations. So, right now, this might not be the forum to address those. So I would highly advise you to bring those questions up with your care center partners and your team, because they can give you specific advice and information regarding to your situation. And again, questions regarding the Delta variant of COVID right now, information is unfolding every day. So I would, again, advise you to stay tuned to the CF's website, the COVID-19 page, because we post the latest and greatest information on that, or specific concerns, contact your care centers and your care center team, because they will be able to share the latest from our medical professionals and our community. But I think, let me see if there was one more question. With twins, do you recommend them to be in the same do you recommend them to be in the same classroom to avoid other germs?
That's an interesting situation. Obviously, there's pros and cons of doing twins in separate classrooms versus in the same, but I guess in pandemic times, I would understand your question, but I don't know. There's pros and cons to both. What do you think, Maureen, Christine, Chloe, anything?
I think it might be hard because at the end of the night, they're still coming. Right? And if you kept them separate, they may still be coming home at the end of the day together.
I think they're thinking about exposure to viruses in two different classrooms versus,
Right.
Good point.
But if you're
Everybody's asking,
exposing one,
it's
they're
maybe
still
not a
coming
point. Sorry.
Yeah.
I actually have a question for the social workers, because this has come up and I think I put it in the chat too, is that we've learned a lot about what can be done virtually in many of our situations, and definitely with schools. But if you have a kid who's sick, you obviously want them to stay home, but having the flexibility of going virtual on those days. Has there been some discussion at putting that in a 504 IEP that allows a CF kid when they're sick to still still Zoom into the classroom and get the benefit of the.
I saw your question, and I guess I think it depends on the district. I feel like even last year, if you were just sick one day, sometimes they wouldn't let kids, I feel like every school was different. I feel like it wasn't like you missed school, so you got to go virtual for that day. Some schools did make that accommodation and some didn't. I think even within my own family and the members of my family, sometimes they could do that and sometimes they couldn't, depending. So I think it's going to be very specific to each school to see if that's a possibility. I think it's a great idea to write it into your 504 plan if it's an option. I just don't know if it's going to work all the time. I don't know what you think, Chloe.
Sorry, Jan, I was responding to a comment in the chat. Can you respond your question again?
Oh, about, putting virtual learning in to a 504 plan, like as an option if you couldn't attend school.
Oh, yeah, I was
Yeah.
about to answer that question in the chat.
Good.
Yes, I think that it is definitely something that you can talk to the school about adding. If you are able, what is going to work best for the child. So you are always able to then add to it. And so if that is something specifically you would like to put in, you can always talk with the school and see if that is an accommodation that they would. There should always be a concrete plan as far as if a child needs to miss and how are they going to be able to stay on track and not fall behind. So that would fit under that, to be able to say, is virtual going to be an option this year? And then if so, is that something that they will be able to utilize? So you can definitely talk to the school about that. And I think
Awesome.
someone had asked about like a 504 and versus an IEP and kind of how it transitions with you. So IEP stops after high school. You do not have an IEP after high school. 504 plans can continue on. So you can have 504 accommodations within college, within work, because those are the accommodations that continue because that is a civil rights law, rather than an IEP, which is an educational law. So yes, your accommodations can really go with you. You can talk, and you can, wherever you go, as far as you being able to receive those accommodations under that law.
Great. I think we've addressed most of the questions that have come in. Once again, if you have questions specific to your personal health issues or anything like that, do address that with your care center team. And I'd like to thank Christine, Chloe, Janine, and Maureen for all of their information presenting today. I'd like to invite you all back for our next town hall, care center town hall, which will be held, I believe, on August 25th. And that'll be a research update from Dr. Susanna McCauley. So we're really excited to share some of the latest and greatest in the research world, clinical trials, et cetera, that will be of interest to our community. So more information will be sent out on that soon, but also make sure to follow our chapter social media feed so that you'll get the latest and greatest on upcoming events. So without further ado, I think I'll give everybody a few minutes back to their lunch hour, but thank you all again. And thank you to everybody that was able to join us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a good one.